All right, welcome everyone. This is the San Diego Svelte Group's November meeting. We have both an in-person audience, and then today is the first time we're doing a live stream. So welcome to everyone joining us online. Just because we have an in-person meetup, usually it takes a few minutes for everyone to stream in. So we're going to give about roughly 5 to 10 minutes for everyone to show up to our physical space. In the meantime, though, you're welcome just to hang out, or if you have any questions, we can just kind of do an informal kind of Q&A session. Feel free to post a comment, and I'll respond to any of those. Maybe just a couple quick announcements, especially for the people joining us online. So we of course are here physically in San Diego. We are in the SceneGem offices. So we want to give a big thank you to SceneGem for providing the space. They are a mobile and web-based development agency. So thank you so much for them for the space, and for feel free to check them out. And with that, I think we're just going to kind of do an informal, I'll keep an eye on the comment section. We're going to do a little bit of kind of chatting here informally, and then we'll start the presentation soon. So with that, if I don't see any comments, we're going to go back to our informal talk here. So here, let's go back. So we were just looking at NPM trends and looking at Svelte growth. There's some strange blips here. So if we look back, 200,000 back in 2022. These are weekly downloads, I believe. Similar time frame. So it went from roughly from a little over 200,000 to almost 400,000, so almost doubling roughly. And then the latest figures, 800,000. So it's roughly doubling every year. So that's pretty good growth. And also Svelte 5, with Svelte 5 coming out, I think there's going to be an uptick as well, but we'll see. And then just to kind of put in perspective, I'm going to pull up Angular core. And I think these blips, we kind of have to disregard them. But here, just to kind of do apples to apples, Angular was 2.2 million, 3.1, 3.3. So it is growing, but is much more leveled off. Yeah, it's unfortunate we have these large blips here, because it kind of throws off the view. But if I change it to a smaller view, let's say last 3 months, so you can kind of see. So I think just for everyone, this is kind of just informal, but Svelte is right now kind of number 4 in terms of usage. Next up is Angular and Vue. Actually, let me pull up Vue here too. I think this is the right one. I think there's someone at the door. Do you mind?
There's one here.
Oh. Yeah. All right. So it looks like Vue's, according to this data, Vue is actually more popular than Angular. Welcome.
Hi. This is a Svelte meetup, I'm guessing.
It is. Yep. So just kind of chit chatting while we kind of wait for everyone to filter in. So yeah, welcome. So yeah, I'm just showing some NPM downloads numbers, and it's a little bit hard to see here, but Svelte is still kind of 4th place, but it is growing much more rapidly than these other frameworks. And if I pull React, you'll see kind of a big disparity. React is, let's see, so around 22 million downloads. So React is definitely the most popular front-end framework right now. But as Svelte's growing, it'd be really great to see it to kind of enter this kind of territory and challenge kind of Angular and Vue. All right, let me check, see if there's any comments right now. Okay, got a hello on the chat, so welcome. Let's see, we have 6 people joining us live. I'm just going to give a couple more minutes. So if you guys have any topics whatsoever that you just want to ask a quick question on, let's do that. Otherwise, we'll get started in just another minute or two. And actually, you know what? I could do a quick introduction. I haven't introduced myself. I don't have a slide for this, but just for those of you who don't know, my name's Attila Buterla. So created the San Diego Svelte group, just someone who's really enthusiastic about Svelte, long-time developer, been building single page apps like 10 years ago, started with AngularJS, then just like a lot of the community moved on to React. Never quite fell in love with React and just saw all this great information on Svelte, all the developer surveys and that sort of thing, kind of rating it very highly. And I tried it out for a hackathon, really enjoyed it quite a bit. And now I'm kind of 100% in on Svelte. So that's my introduction. I'm going to go ahead and get started. I know we have more people supposed to join us. If you could just, I guess if there's someone knocking the door, maybe we can help let them in. But yeah, let's go ahead and get started with the presentation. And again, for the people joining us online, feel free to post a question. All right, so here we go. All right, so I guess the first, starting off with some big news. So I don't know if people are aware of this, but Svelte Summit of Fall 2023 was this Saturday. It was an online virtual conference. And as part of that, they announced the release of Svelte 5 beta. Some people refer to it as alpha, some people refer to it as the beta, but Rich Harris, the creator of Svelte, called it a beta, so that's what I'm going with. So as of this Saturday, you can go ahead and do an NVM install. And if you do Svelte at Next, you're going to get the latest version of Svelte 5. Welcome.
Thank you.
So yeah, you are able to install and use it right now, today. It is still in a test or alpha stage, so do not, unless you're super adventurous, do not use it in production. But it is ready to use today to play around with. It is supposed to be fully backwards compatible. So if your code is all Svelte 4, for example, you should be able to upgrade. Just do so at your own peril. There's probably some bugs while it's still in this kind of beta stage. Another big announcement was that Stack Overflow on their developer blog announced that they're actually 100% adopting Svelte. They are totally redoing the whole Stack Overflow, and there's multiple sites in the Stack Overflow ecosystem, but they're basically redoing them all, and they chose Svelte for that. So that's kind of really cool from a just a visibility and big site using Svelte.
Are they going to use Svelte Kit along with it?
As of right now, and there's basically a podcast, like a 30-minute interview where they talk about it. Initially, it's just Svelte. I don't know about down the road. Initially, it's just Svelte, or at least that's what they stated. That's already underway. So my understanding is back, I think in April, May, they already started to use it. The reasons why they stated why they're using it, kind of all the things we already know what makes Svelte great. So great developer experience, good performance, small bundle size, all those things were referenced. By all means, I encourage you. I know you can't really click on a link on a slide, but if you just Google it, you'll find it. One of the quotes, though, I liked, I put here. So they said, compared to React, it was performing way better, and that was another factor why we decided to go with Svelte rather than a bigger framework. So that was really cool news. Welcome. And then, so obviously, I think Svelte 5 coming out is huge. It's really intended to address the biggest pain points with Svelte, and already Svelte is well known for being very developer friendly, but addresses kind of the biggest pain points. Obviously, big sites adopting Svelte is very positive, like Stack Overflow. So I also just wanted to, we were taking a look at some of this earlier, if you joined us earlier, but basically looking at the growth of Svelte. So this slide is a little bit older, so it's October data, but if we compare, I forget which week it is, but one of the weeks in 2022, October 2022, for 416,000 weekly downloads. If we compare that to the comparable time in October, 765,000, so an 84% increase. And actually just earlier we were comparing 2001 to 2002, it was more or less double. So I think that's really good just to see like the adoption, it's really trending upward, it's growing quickly. As someone that likes Svelte, that's really positive. And I think also it's good to have, frankly, just have a little more competition in the front end framework space. Okay, so a couple other key things came out during this announcement. So last time we went over runes, so I'm not going to go over runes again. That was part of last month's meetup, and that's I did a recording of it online if anyone wants to check it out. And there's plenty of information about runes, but there's a couple newly revealed features as part of this this fall summit. So snippets. So one thing that developers have requested for Svelte has a restriction of 1 component per file. Some developers wanted to have multiple components per file. So the Svelte team actually went ahead, not in the live version of Svelte, but in a developer version. They went and had that feature, and they didn't think it had a very good developer experience. So instead, they came up with something that's a little bit of a more of a compromise, and it's known as snippets. And I'll show a code example in a second, but essentially snippets allow you to reuse markup without having to create like a brand new component. So here's a code example. So I declared here a snippet. It's basically, you can think of as a function, and it can take a single parameter, in this case name. And then as you can see here, I'm using the snippet, just kind of a simple if-else example. So I don't have to replicate any of this. And I'll just kind of do a silly thing. So if I put a long name, it goes in the else area. So that's it at a super high level. Obviously, you can put a lot more functionality in here. You can have it reference globals if you need to within this file, and you can do a lot more. But yeah, essentially that's kind of what a snippet is. And then they also made some changes to event handling. So just to kind of reiterate, everything that worked in Svelte 4 will continue to work in Svelte 5. So it's not like they removed anything. But if you look at these examples for this would apply for any events, but in particular, if you did on click, this is an old syntax. So you do on : click, and they would reference a function essentially. They've introduced a new syntax. And so as you can see here, it doesn't look, first glance, it's just removing a colon, but this is actually like the vanilla JavaScript. If you were to add an event handler in vanilla JavaScript, you would actually use on click. And it'll make more sense when I show the example why this is a little bit better. Like, I guess one thing is, yeah, it's more, I guess you could say standards client, where the one on the left is more of a Svelte specific behavior, where this is more of a standard. But also it allows you to pass functions as props. So let's go to this example here real quickly. Okay, so I have, it's kind of a silly example, but I have a button. And as you can see, I'm just getting on click on my props, and then I put it on my internal button. And so down here, this is just an example of the old syntax. Down here, I have on click equals and then this function, and it works. Now, I can also remove the colon here just to prove that it works. It works with a colon, or I can remove it and it will work here as well. Because this is just a regular HTML element, it's not really that interesting. But this second example, it's actual Svelte component. So now you're utilizing props. So you're kind of, I guess, staying more standardized way and handling now all props are kind of handled the same. So that's kind of, there's some more details regarding this Svelte 5 Summit or Svelte Summit. These are kind of the key takeaways. Again, runes were already announced. There was a lot of coverage around them. But yeah, before I move on, I just wanted to provide an update. This was literally this past Saturday where they had this event. But
Where was it?
oh, it was just online, 100% online.
Okay.
Yeah, it was actually for us on the Pacific Coast. It started at 6 a.m. So, and it was about 5.5 hours long. But there is a recording of it online if you're interested. There's some new developer tools that are announced. There are some other things that were announced as well. I'm just doing the high level kind of summary. Maybe we'll do a deeper dive and a follow up. But this is something that just happened a couple of days ago, so wanted to kind of cover the main topics.
Do you just go to the Svelte site?
If you go to YouTube and just do like Svelte Summit 2023 fall, you should be able to find it. Cool. And then I'm just going to go back to, okay, someone had a comment from a few minutes ago using Svelte in one of the biggest bank in his country. I don't know what country that is, but that is cool. All right. So just to circle back for a second, originally this meetup was just going to talk about some cool features in Svelte, but because of this conference that took place and these major announcements, I definitely wanted to touch upon it. And I think it's a big deal that you can actually npm install the Svelte 5 now. Before you could only use REPLs for it. So we're going to talk about features now that are not Svelte 5 specific. You can still use them if you want Svelte 5. These are not new features. So the first one that I'm going to cover is slots. One thing that's really interesting, Rich Harris, the original developer behind Svelte and is still leading the team, he made a comment during his talk that he thinks slots will potentially be replaced by snippets. And he also had some comments that, in his opinion, slots were the worst part of Svelte. So if you're going to go forward and start developing, maybe you don't invest a lot of time into into slots. But I just wanted to cover them. This was actually before I even knew that they're going to have snippets. This was something I put in the presentation. But real high level slots are a way that Svelte will pass basically children to component. So for reuse, it'll make more sense when I have an example. And you can have multiple slots, and one component can have multiple slots. You can also have a default value for a slot, but I think the best thing is just to show an example and it'll make more sense. So I'll show the more simple example here. So card.svelte is a very simple component, and it has a slot here. And right now I could leave it blank. I put in this default syntax, and then I just have some styling. So in here, when I import the card, I'm putting hello world. Now, if I remove hello world, it'll go to that default content. I think it's good potentially if you're going to use slots to have default content, just so, just like, hey, put your content here, or some sort of default text is always a good idea. But as soon as you utilize it, it will replace that default content. And you can put anything here. Like it could be other components. It could be complex HTML, whatever you want. And then just to show another example, I have cart 2. This now has 2 slots. And when you have more than one slot, that you basically have to name your slots so that the consumer can kind of specify which slot they want to use. So I named one slot title and the other one called content. And the only difference is I have some styling on the title to make the font bigger. If we go back here, you can see now I have just on any parent element, I would just specify slot equals and whatever the name is. So like the ordering, for example, does not matter. I could put it on the bottom. It doesn't care. It's all about the name. As you can see, I can remove a slot. It doesn't care if you don't use all the slots. So that, in a nutshell, is slots. And again, just going by kind of what Rich Harris said, he thinks it's one of the least best parts of Svelte. So it's good to be aware of them and to use them. But yeah, if you're going to start using Svelte 5, maybe take a closer look into snippets. Okay, so moving along. Bindings. Now, I think this is just me. I think bindings are a real cool and powerful feature of Svelte, and it's comparing it to other front-end frameworks, React included. It's just way easier to do DOM manipulation. So I'm just going to show the example because that speaks to itself. So here you can see I have these reactive variables. This is Svelte 4, so I'm not using state. I'm using the older syntax. And you can see I have name, and name I'm binding it to the value of this input element. So any HTML element can have attributes, and you can bind directly to those attributes. In this case, I'm binding to value, but I could bind to type. I could bind to background color. I guess any valid attribute I can bind to. And then essentially it does a two-way data binding. So in here, I just kind of created a fancier example where I'm binding to these different inputs. And so I can say hello, whatever. And because it's a two-way data binding, it's going to automatically update this element. But I also have these other features like, hey, I want to change the font size. I want to change the color. I have this color picker it's connected to. And even down here, this is a little bit tricky, but I just have this feature. I can make it, I have an array, this dynamic derived state based upon this array. And so I can control how many instances there are of that. It's in this within each block. So that's why we see it repeated. So this is just one example, but you can bind to canvas elements, for example. So if you're going to do more advanced things in drawing with canvases, that's another use case. And really, it's really any valid DOM element you can bind to. You can even bind to other Svelte components. That's kind of an edge case. Usually, you probably don't want to do that. There's probably better ways to accomplish whatever you're trying to do. But yeah, you have direct access to everything here. Yeah, obviously you don't have to use query selectors. You don't, comparing to React, you don't have to use ref or anything like that. So I really like it. It's very powerful. It's very straightforward. But yeah, that's binding. Okay, looks like we have a question, but I don't see what the question is. So hand pink waving. Okay. All right, if someone has a question, I guess post it here. All right, are we good? Any questions in the local group, or are we ready to move on? We're good? All right, cool. So yeah, binding, I love how straightforward and simple it is. Next up is actions, and this is going to be one where you read the definition, or at least for me, didn't make a whole lot of sense until I actually saw an action in action. in use. But real high level actions are just functions, and they're functions that get attached to HTML elements. So in your template, and it's attached to the template using the use directive. And basically that function will have a reference to the DOM element. So it'll make more sense when I show the example, but that function has two parameters. The second one is optional. The first one is the actual DOM element that its action is associated with. And then the second one is just basically if you want to send any options along. Actions basically can do any sort of DOM manipulation. So it can add event listeners. It can dispatch custom events. You can also do DOM manipulation. And then it's an optional return value that you can specify both a update and destroy function. So for example, if you're adding a bunch of event listeners, you probably want to destroy those, because if you don't, that's going to create memory leaks. That has nothing to do with Svelte. That's just kind of, that's just general programming. And then update function, basically if there's changes to the values, the update function will get called. So useful things for like interfacing with third-party libraries, tooltips, adding custom event handlers. Let me show some examples, because I think that will make the most sense just reading this. I know when I first read the docs, I was like, what the heck are they actually talking about? Oh, just one other thing, like Svelte Kit has a concept known as form actions. That's something totally different. This is just Svelte actions. Okay, so for my first example, I try to create something that was just super, by the way, can everyone see that okay? Or do you want me, I can zoom in a little bit. Okay, so all I have is this function here, color me. This is an action. Here I could have called this whatever I want. Here I'm calling it node. And literally all it does is set the background color to this, either what you pass in or this default value. And then you can see here, I'm attaching it to kind of random elements. I just say use color me. And as you can see, it made this color here. I add it to a button. And if I want, I can pass in the optional value. So let's say yellow, it makes it yellow. If I want to, it's any valid HTML element. This is a test. Could be a div, it could be whatever that actually would allow it to support a background color. And it's gonna make it purple, right? So this is kind of a silly example, but it's just showing how simple it is. Like literally, it can be a one-liner. You just have a function that takes a single argument. You can do whatever you want in it. Now, personally, I don't think it's the greatest idea to do a lot of DOM manipulation in your actions, but I have some more examples that are a little more practical that might help kind of show, I don't need to save that, I can show some more practical use cases. So, all right, so I have an array of fruits here, not particularly interesting. And then I created an action. This one, I call it type ahead. It's pretty straightforward. I add an event listener, and I think this is kind of the sweet spot for actions is adding event listeners. And then I just say on key up, I basically look at the text that's being inputted, and as long as it's longer than 0 in length, it will filter a matching fruit and kind of output it in this suggestions area. So, let's say, pretty straightforward, right? So obviously you'll notice this is not handling the action itself, is not handling the UI portion. Like if I wanted to make a type ahead component, I could totally make a type ahead component and have both the visualization logic and, I guess for lack of a better word, this kind of business logic where I'm filtering. I could tie those together and put them all in one component. This is kind of an example of you just want to have kind of logic and event handlers or event dispatching logic. Yes, you can modify the DOM here too, but I rather I'd rather have the consumer of the action handle the DOM manipulation. So like, if we were to look at this in a more practical way, this is pretty simple what it's doing, but imagine there's something more complicated going on and I'm doing a lot with different event listeners. That's a great way to encapsulate that logic and to reuse it. And then if we wanted to, you could be like, okay, different consumers could handle the visualization. Maybe they want to have a type ahead that looks one way. Someone else might want a type ahead that looks totally different way. So this is kind of the sweet spot of the action, is handling kind of the logic and the event registering. Let me show another example. And there's a lot of possibilities what you can do with this. Here, I'm going to skip. This is just another take on this. I'm just going to briefly go through this. Here I moved type ahead to its own separate file. So just to demonstrate, you don't have to tightly couple anything. I'm showing an example of destroy here. So this is where you'd remove your event listener, again, to prevent memory leaks. Otherwise, it's similar. It's just more decoupled. And then I'm going to go, just to show how update works. So if I start typing in here, so again, I'm just doing a console log, but potentially this could be an API call. You know, maybe you have to query some backend database or whatever. This can be whatever you need it to be. And then, yeah, let me just show the fourth example. Okay, so here I have these objects. I have this box component, and I created an action called move. And you can see here there's a lot more going on with event listeners and custom events. Just to give kind of the high level overview, you can mouse over and you can see I'm tying logic to mouse down, mouse up, and mouse move. And so as I'm moving this, it's reporting the XY coordinates. And I, of course, only wrote this logic one time. It's being used here in this box element, which is just here where is the reference, the use? Oh, here it is, use move action. So I'm just attaching that move action to this shape. I happen to make circles. It obviously doesn't matter what it is. And then I have a little bit of logic in the component just to handle the visual piece. I could technically do this in the action and change the icons, but I'm intentionally leaving UI logic out of the action. And basically this component is listening for an action. Let's see. Yeah, on moving, I could call move box. And then I could totally move the elements here. I could also move the elements in move.js. But what I want to demonstrate here is this parent component now, it handles the moving, and I didn't implement this, but I could put collision detection. Like I try to move it here and it says, hey, I know there's a box here or there's a ball here. You can't move to that space, right? So you couldn't put that all into, say, the move action or the box component, but you can elevate that up and then have something at the top level that is aware of all the different things taking place. So this was like fairly easy to put together too. And it really, I guess for me, it really demonstrates how, number one, the power of actions, but two, how easy it is to do like visuals like this. Like it'd be pretty easy to add motion here, to have these like bouncing around off each other, bouncing off the walls. This is basically pretty quickly something you can put together. So that's actions. That's just some examples. Some other practical real world stuff is like tool tips. Like if you have a text input and you want to show some sort of little tool tip, right? You can say when on focus is set, you display something, Or another one is for modals, like, hey, if someone has the mouse and they click outside the modal to close the modal, those are all examples of what you can use actions for. So a lot of power behind actions, a lot of possibilities. With great power comes great responsibility. So be mindful. Like, I guess my advice is don't do a ton of DOM manipulation in the action, but doing the event stuff, I think, makes a lot of sense. All right. Transitions. So transitions. So CSS has native transitions, and there's a lot you can do with that. Svelte specifically, and of course you can still use native CSS transitions. Svelte has its own kind of system, making it really easy to create animations. So typical use case might be when an element is added or removed from the DOM. And so there's basically 7 types of transitions, but like, let's just say you're deleting something from a list. If you don't have a transition, it just automatically goes from being there to not being there. If you add a transition and the different ones fade, fly, blur, you can read all the examples there. It gives it an effect. So let me show an example because I have a lot of, you'll see pretty much most of those. You can even make your own custom transition. So if you're into that kind of thing, you can get real fancy. But here, just to show an example. Okay, so let me zoom out a little bit, make sure you can see well. So here's just some examples of transitions. I have, just so you can follow what exactly is taking place here, all I have is a set interval, and it's toggling this visible reactive variable. And so all these things, each time it's shown and hidden, it transitions in and out. So you can see each one scale changes side, fade kind of fades in, fades out. Blur is kind of similar, but it has its own kind of effect. And most of these transitions have values you can specify. So they kind of have their default values, but you can also say, like, how long should it take for it to fade in and out? So, I could make as an example, I can make the fly go real fast. So if I change it from 2000 milliseconds to 200, it's going to totally it's going to fly. So it just went way faster. And of course you can specify the X and Y. So here I have it going in a diagonal motion, but if I just want it to go strictly left to right, it can do that. Let me just mouse out. So, like these are kind of exaggerated examples. You don't probably wouldn't want a page that looks like totally nuts like this, or things are flying around everywhere. But it's really kind of one of these fine touches of, I'm removing something, I'm adding something, and just kind of want to make it look cool. I'm not a designer by any stretch of the imagination, but some of these kind of effects add nice touches to your app. Like I said, you can make your own custom transitions. I'm not going super deep. This is kind of just a high level view, but there's a lot more you can do. There's a lot to transitions. But yeah, this is kind of the high level. And then kind of similar, and this next one is animations. I probably know the least about animations of all this stuff. Animations are similar to transitions, but I guess they kind of cover a little bit more. And they really are designed for each block. So I'm going to go ahead and show another example, because if you say, what's the difference between a transition and an animation, they don't really look that different. So maybe just showing an example is a little bit easier. So there's a lot kind of going on here, using Fruit again. And yeah, so all I'm doing is loading in this list. Some of this stuff is transitions where just to kind of reload it, I just kind of fade stuff in here. And so, yeah, that's just a transition. But if I want to show, hey, I bought this item, I don't know if this is a super practical use case, but okay, I want to remove banana and I want to show in bot. So just this kind of whatever you want to call this. This is now an animation. So it's pretty, is it that different than a transition? Not really, but you're kind of moving stuff from, in this case, from one list to another. Frankly, there's kind of a lot you can do here, and I'm not, there's more to it than transitions. But yeah, just kind of wanted to cover from a high level what kind of things you can do here. And again, like I think a lot of us designing apps, we might not even bother to worry about this kind of thing, right? It's just a nice touch, and some cases it might be distracting if you overdo it, and some cases it's just kind of adding a nice touch. So yeah, that is all for today. So yeah, I just want to see if people have any questions, comments. Let's open the floor. And that goes for people. Oh, this comment here. First few minutes, I'm already hooked. Okay, awesome. Thank you for the feedback. Yeah, any questions, I guess online or in person? Yes.
Did they release the source for Svelte?
So you can go, yeah, let's do it right now. Quick answer is yes. And here, we go to Svelte, GitHub, and it is not under the main branch. Here, now the pressure is on. The quick answer is yes, it's available, and I think it's under, I forget the name of the branch, but yeah, I guess a quick answer, it is available. Yes, okay, so it's available here under this release. Oh, by the way, since we're talking about this, so there is no announced release date for Svelte 5, but there is a status page. You can see they measure their status by the number of tests, total tests, and then tests pass. Last time I checked, it was roughly at 95%. They are aiming for end of this year. No guarantees though. And by the way, I see this, like I kind of monitor this every few days. The number of tests actually go up. So even though it's 95%, it's been 95% for a little while. But yeah, the key takeaway is that it's getting closer. Yeah, and you put me on the spot, so I don't remember exactly which branch it is, but it is under one of the branches here, and you can totally look at the source code. Yeah. Yeah, any other questions, comments? Yes.
Question on the animation page. I saw on the list of elements, there are two events. One is in receive, out send. I'm not very sure about that.
Yeah, so there's here, let's go back to the example if I have it handy. Slots, animation. So there's yeah, I probably should cover this. There's this concept of in and out. Yeah, so you specify, basically there has to be, basically they're used with each loops, and you have to specify a key, and that's how it can identify this is what the element is. So yeah, basically to add something to the list and then to remove it from the list. And I replicate that both here. This is just a list of strings, so the fruit is just a string, but if this is an object, you'd need some sort of unique ID. Otherwise, it wouldn't know which element to animate.
Is there like a specific property only for animate or for list item inside of for each statement?
Sorry, I missed the first part of that.
Is this a specific to animate or needed for list items for some as they're inside each block?
My understanding, and again, this is not something I do a lot of, but my understanding is animate is specific to each blocks. I kind of, as I was researching it, it's like, can you animate anything that's not in each block? I didn't find examples of that. That's the one subject I'm probably the least up to date on. But yeah, that's my understanding at least. Yeah. And let's see. Can you tell us how to use effect? Does it replace on mount and on destroy? Okay, so now we're talking about runes. So I'm answering one of the online questions. So we did review runes last time, so I won't go super in detail. On mount is not going away. I don't know if everyone here is familiar with on mount, but basically the idea is it's a life cycle method. So if you want to run some sort of logic after your component has rendered, you can do that. Effect is similar, but it's different, and you can have a component that has both on mount and effect. Effect, there's some overlap between the two. So effect will run kind of in a similar manner, but if effect has dependencies, let me see if I have a code example for this, because I did do this in a previous, I might not have it handy, unfortunately. I had some old examples for this. Okay, so unfortunately I don't have it handy, but I guess the quick answer to that is effect is going to run a similar time, but let's say in effect you're referencing a couple reactive variables. So today you use let, in Svelte 5 you use $state or $derived. If your effect is referencing any state values or derived values and those values have changed, it'll rerun that effect. So Rivvan N. Hopefully that answers your question. But yeah, like I said, last month I recorded kind of it was actually a re-recording, but basically in-depth dive into runes. And there's also just a ton of great, like if you just Google or look on YouTube, you're going to find a lot of information. But yeah, that's it. So I guess just to kind of wrap up that thought, Svelte 5, a big part of it is runes. It also comes with big performance improvements, and Svelte already performs very well, but now it's like exceptional. And then of course the snippets and changes to event handling. Those are kind of the major changes. Cool. Any other questions, comments? I think we're good. I'm going to go ahead and kill the live stream if there's no other questions. I guess for whoever wants to stick around, if you want to do any networking, that's totally cool. Otherwise, thanks everyone for joining.
Thank you.